So now I'm sure that you have understood how to change aperture, shutter and ISO on your camera. Now we are going to the most important thing, which is called the exposure meter. What really happens is, for the camera to get the right light, you got to watch the exposure meter and only then click it. It is almost like, you know, a speedometer in a car. When you press the accelerator, then you can see the speedometer going up, right? And you know what speed are you driving the car. In the same manner, there is an exposure meter in your camera that tells you whether your photograph will look good or not, whether it will have enough light or not. We have covered aperture, that is f number. We have covered the shutter speed, that is say 1 by 1 part of a second, and then we have covered the ISO. But if you see in between, we have something called as a meter. And this is called the exposure meter. It is basically camera telling you whether camera is able to see or receive the light that is appropriate. So if it is at 0, that means camera is telling you that yes, we are good to go. If it is in minus or negative, that means the camera is telling you the light is not enough for me to click. If you are going to click it, the photograph will look dark and it will be underexposed. If it is in the plus side, then the photograph will look too bright. It will have a lot of extra light in it. Now you got to decide how will you bring this exposure meter to 0 by playing with aperture, shutter and ISO. Now if you look over here, it is telling me that it is a negative. If I just go ahead and click, then I am going to get a underexposed shot. What I can do is I can reduce the shutter speed. If I reduce the shutter speed, say like that, now it is coming to 0, a little negative, so I'll reduce a little bit more. Yes, now it is perfect 0. I'm going to go ahead and hit it, so you get it over here, right? And now if you see it here, 0, and you hit it, you get it right. If you increase the ISO, and you see that now it is going to positive. So if you hit on that, that means it will lead to a very bright photograph. So what we have to do, or we have to remember, is always watch the exposure meter before hitting the click button. I look into your camera through the viewfinder, and in between, when you look in the middle of the frame at the bottom, you will see an exposure meter moving. In the middle it will read 0, and the left it might read minus or negative, at the right it might read plus. Now it can be anywhere, but the main thing is that we have to bring that to 0. If it is in the minus, that means we are going to get dark photographs, and if it is in the plus, then we are going to get bright photographs. So we have to adjust the aperture, shutter and ISO to bring the exposure meter exactly to 0. When we do that, we usually get good photographs. It is not rigid that you always click a photograph on 0. You can play with the rule. You can go a little plus or little minus depending on your taste or depending on the look that you want to give to your photograph. But the most important thing is that you should watch your exposure meter before hitting the click button, because if you do that, you will have full control over your camera, and you know for a fact what kind of result you are going to get. If the results are not satisfactory, you would know that the speedometer, or the exposure meter was not set correctly. So aperture, shutter speed and ISO, these are nothing but the gears. You have to change these gears to get to the right exposure. Now I would like you to go ahead, go outdoors and click 100 photographs with the right exposure, wherein you bring it to 0, and you got to do that in the manual mode. Go to the manual mode and then select aperture, shutter and ISO and click photographs where your subjects are properly lit. You are able to see them nicely, the way you see them from your eyes, exactly the same way you see them from your camera. Now a lot of students, they ask me this question that Vishal, I have understood that ISO is the last thing, but which is first when we are talking about aperture or shutter? Shall I adjust the aperture first or shall I adjust the shutter first? Now here it's simple answer. When you are clicking a stationary subject, the subject that is still or posing for you, then the role of the shutter speed is very limited. You can select the shutter speed of say 1 by 125 or 1 by 200 and you are done. You have to play with the aperture for a stationary subject when you want to play with the depth. When you want the background should go blur or background should remain clear. So usually in a stationary subject we play or set the aperture first. When it comes to a moving subject, say for example if you are clicking say a race or say a player, you are clicking kids who are skating. Now here the shutter speed is the most important because the speed of your subject is high and you got to increase your shutter so that you are able to freeze the action. So there you have to select the shutter speed first and aperture can be done with the camera. Thank you.